General disclaimer. I don't want to paint my parent or any other parents as abusers. Though some parents may very well have been, describing all parents that have utilized corporal punishment or customary physical punishment as a means of child rearing is reductionary. I believe in Bell Hooks' definition of love, which does define the sort of love that involves physical violence, aka corporal punishment, as dysfunctional, which applies to many relationships that people of color often have with their parents. However, this dysfunction is mine, even though I deserved better. And now I actually have better. Being in this space allowed me to realize that my parent and supportive parental village were trying their best with the tools that they were given. However, I still get to acknowledge that their best was not enough for me. Now let me make this clear. I ain't got no kids, but I still have a completely lucid memory of being a kid. And that is an important experience. Therefore, when not incorporating the experiences of others, I will be speaking from the perspective of someone who remembers being directly affected by experiences with corporal violence during child rearing, without time and experience with children diluting my memory. Please feel free to form and evaluate your own opinions utilizing these experiences. Also, please take note that this is a predominantly intra-communal conversation, and this channel will always center perspectives from Black people. Therefore, if you are not a person of color, please do not act the fool in my comment section and get blocked. I would hate that for you. And here's a shout out to the patrons because they so great and they fund all the things on this channel, so you should become a patron. Hey Lil Vix, I'm here to give you an update on all of the ways that you can support the channel. The Victory the Creator Patreon has 5 tiers varying from $3 to $150, depending on how much you want to contribute to the channel. And it's available in the description and on the channel's landing page. You can also subscribe to our YouTube membership, where you get access to private community posts about videos in progress. You can also support using one-time options such as super thanks and super chats that are available directly on the video. And if those options don't interest you, you can also use the Ko-fi link linked in the description box. If you're not able to support the channel monetarily, please like, comment, and subscribe. Here is a list of physical items that the channel is saving up for. Our email is in the description to contact us if you have access to any of these items and would like to help out. Now, let's get back to the video, shall we? When parents and guardians don't have high emotional IQ because they were trained to suppress their emotions, how are they supposed to raise mentally and emotionally okay children? How, Sway?
How, Sway?
This is a reason why many children of color like myself may immediately become defensive when speaking about their experiences with punitive discipline. Because our parents and guardians were trying their best, and that should have been enough. But it is okay to say that it wasn't, and that the reason was generational trauma. If we don't confront these cycles and call spades spades, we gonna be stuck reneging for generations. Somebody help me in here. Come on.
I was on the internet, what's the funniest reason you got your butt whooped as a kid? And I asked my Instagram followers, and these reasons are hilarious. Refusing to eat the burnt pancakes my grandmother made one morning. You better eat her mistakes. I ate cereal in the afternoon. Laughing while getting my butt whooped. That makes sense. Playing outside after being told to stay in or out. Apparently out was the wrong choice. I lost my tooth at school and didn't bring it home because I left it on the bus. Why did that get a whooping?
I would like to begin debunking the long-believed myth that whoopings are Black cultural practices, or even traditions brought over from Africa, because they're not. In fact, I'm actually just going to read an excerpt from Dr. Stacey Patton's Corporal Punishment in Black Communities, Not an Intrinsic Cultural Tradition, but Racial Trauma, published by the American Psychological Association. Once in America, slaves as parents were under tremendous pressure to shape their children into docile field workers and to teach them proper deference and demeanor in front of white people. Child deaths, brutal whippings and torture, sexual abuse, and being sold away from their relatives for the rest of their lives were constant features of plantation life. After slaves were emancipated in 1865, yet still not free, the rules of racial etiquette and the ritualistic beatings continued as a new kind of coercive Southern labor system emerged that depended on Black child workers. Once again, white people co-opted Black parenting to make sure that it performed the same kind of function and freedom that it had during slavery. With sanctioning from the Black church, Black parents enacted the master's lash to instill obedience. Their reasoning was simple: prepare Black children to deal with the chronic stresses that they would face to keep them alive. This passage perfectly segues into a few other important topics of discussion when talking about the system of perpetuating corporal punishment. Often utilized with this myth were the Bible verse, "Spare the rod, spoil the child," and the culturally hegemonic idea that raising a child with whoopings makes them more civilized than children raised without them. And as much fun as it would be to two-time these topics, I'm gonna go one at a time. Spare the rod, spoil the child rhetoric has been eating y'all up since Wakanda found its first stash of vibranium and heart-shaped herbs. Let me tell you something. As a Christian with sense, I feel like we can acknowledge that maybe, and stay with me on this one, the Bible shouldn't only be read literally. Like maybe, just maybe, the rod could be a metaphor used for a tool to guide your children towards a healthier future. Maybe. Also, please critically engage with what causes you to literally enforce that scripture harder than hall monitors enforce clear hallways during class while you still eating your crawfish boils and mixing your fabrics. Quickly. Secondly, when pondering on the idea of whoopings magically making a child better behaved than others, I couldn't help but reflect that in my own personal experience, that belief was most commonly held by Black people of a lower socioeconomic class. I didn't know if my feelings were justified, but apparently I'm not the only one that feels the same. According to a research project conducted by professors at the University of Michigan titled Household Economic Hardship as a Moderator of the Associations Between Maternal Spanking and Child Externalizing Behavior Problems, spanking is more commonly used in low-income households. And even logically, it makes sense why. When you don't have access to resources that other people utilize to punish children, it can feel like you're left with little option. AKA, if other parents take away their kids' devices, but the only device that your kid has is for school, then all of a sudden a slap looks like a much clearer solution. Decisions like this, combined with a term coined as performance parenting, or the social pressure to act out parenthood in a certain acceptable way, also plays into why parents end up overwhelmed and releasing those pent-up emotions onto their children through physical, mental, and emotionally abusive methods. Then, the guilt caused by the lack of access to resources combined with the lack of access to / a justified fear of mental health services such as therapy lead to such emotional overwhelm that the cry and I'll give you something to cry about mentality enters the room and takes center stage. And this mentality does nothing more but reinforce the cycle of generational trauma acquired from corporal parenting. It contributes to this hegemonic idea of an establishment of respect through dominance and violence, instead of a desire for mutual respect. Isn't it funny how it always connects back to hetero-patriarchally hegemonic capitalism? Ugh. It smells like All About Love in here all of a sudden. Now that we've gone over those two major ideas, let's go over another important but often overlooked topic. The same children that weren't parented effectively when they were young often have to reparent themselves. In texts such as Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson, this topic is delved into in full detail, exploring everything from creating boundaries to treating yourself with respect. Because when you grow up with a parent that doesn't acknowledge either, you have a bit of a problem doing it for yourself and with other people. According to Dr. Lindsay Gibson, Only emotionally phobic, emotionally immature people believe that wanting empathy and understanding is a sign of weakness. There are many times in which children like myself have sought out emotional support from parents who have not been able to provide it because it was not given to them. This has often led to a misdirection of confusion and stress to be released on the child for simply asking for deep emotional connection and mental stimulation, which of course can lead back to corporal punishment. This not only leaves the child with more difficulty in asking for the love that they need, but the parent with guilt and compounded stress. When talking about the tangible effects of corporal punishment, I think it's important that we not only discuss the effect of it on the child, but on the parent as well. According to research by Dr. Joy DeGruy, cited in the article, Battling Something Bigger Than Me, a phenomenological investigation of generational trauma in African American women, post-traumatic slave syndrome, a play on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 disorder of post-traumatic stress disorder, is a term apt enough to explain the multi-generational transmission of trauma. In fact, she aligns the symptom of PTSD with how the residual effects of slavery show up in African Americans today. Erica Wilkins coined the phrase, residual effects of slavery, to describe how the racist treatment of African Americans during and after slavery has impacted multiple generations of African Americans. One example of RES includes the infliction of dangerous, oppressive conditions within the African American family home with the intention of fostering successful socialization of children into the majority culture. Sound familiar? Wilkins posits that this may look like African American parents using forms of corporal punishment to assist children in suppressing urges to battle the oppressive conditions of life outside of the home. As you can probably deduce from the passage, reproducing structures emblematic of slavery in a household does not only affect the child being parented in such a manner, but it of course does have a significantly more researched effect on the child, leading to the externalization of behavior problems and an increase of the risk of drawing the attention of Child Protective Services, which are already overrepresented in areas of color, re-referencing the research by Dr. Stacey Patton. I would once again like to emphasize that the usage of corporal punishment is unhealthy for the parent as well, even when it would take less time than actually addressing the needs of one's children, referencing our discussion of the connection between class, race, and punishment. There are many names utilized analogously with the term conscious parenting, such as gentle parenting, mindful parenting, laissez-faire parenting, and intentional parenting, but they are not all actually the same. I will be exploring conscious and intentional parenting as a pathway for healthy child rearing. Often, parents look at their children as possessions instead of beings to shepherd till adulthood, in order for the then grown children to be able to do the same. This could be done for a variety of reasons. Perhaps this makes the difficult task of raising children easier to rationalize. However, children are not possessions. They are lucid beings that need caretakers to guide them towards their own version of maturity.
My name is Oliver Levy, born and raised in Jamaica, came to Canada, and through my experience of losing my first marriage and now on to my second marriage, which we are 15 years now, through that experience and breakthroughs, I've developed a 3-step process that allow parents to raise successful kids without being frustrated. So here's the thing about the mindful parenting approach and the mindful parenting methodology. This all the rules. I apply like 10 or 12 rules over years, way over year. My child and myself, or children ourselves, our relationships stay intact. And you have choices to test the boundaries. Yes, of course. Kids supposed to test the boundaries. People think I'm crazy when I tell parents that, hey, kids supposed to get you upset. That's why they're here. They're supposed to test the boundaries. It's up to you now. How do you respond to that to help them to learn and guide them? And most importantly, your relationship with them must be stronger every single day. That's the key. So you have to keep that rules and techniques and strategies and tools separately, and just make sure you work on your parent-child relationship.
I feel as though many parents often get obsessed with raising their children to be like them. And if not that, they get so obsessed with not raising their children the way that their parents raised them that they end up repeating the same mistakes. One way to ensure you're honoring your child's agency is to interrogate why you do the things you do as a parent. When it comes to parenting, the generational cycle of unnecessary physical punishment has been perpetuated for so long, other methods of heart-centered parenting are often discredited as for white people.
So, hey y'all, my name is Dr. Candace Nicole. I am the hot girl scientist, a mama, a wife, a sister, and an associate professor at the University of Kentucky and founding director of the Center for Healing Racial Trauma. I think we have to interrogate our relationship with power and our own sense of impotence, because a lot of things that parents do that are harmful and are related to corporal punishment are based in a sense of impotence or powerlessness in the world. Some parents are just terrified. They're terrified that their children are going to be at risk for harm. They see all of the things that the world is doing to harm people, and they're like, if I can just train them up in the way that they should go, then they can avoid harm. You know at the core that that's not true. Like, you know that you often can't protect your kids from things that you wish you could protect them from. And so it's terrifying to imagine that, but to feel some sense of empowerment, we enact corporal punishment so we can say, I did the best I could. You know, I'm going to beat them before the police get to them. Or I'm going, you know, like those type of lessons come from fear. I don't think it's a useful modality of parenting. That's what I will say. But I do think there are connections. So the connections date back for people in the United States. Then we can date it back to the boarding schools for Native Americans and indigenous people in these lands, and how they were beat and socialized out of their indigenous heritage in ways. We talk about the enslaved people of the African diaspora all through the Americas and how they were beaten into submission and murdered outside of resistance to build this country. And, you know, like the same for all types of groups of people of the global majority. So not just in the United States, but through imperialism and colonialism, like the way it shows up in Nigeria, the way it shows up in China, the way it shows up in India. All of these spaces have enacted forms of corporal punishment for lower caste people, like people who are just ranked lower on the human hierarchy. And children, for most of our heritage, have been lower on the human hierarchy. And so the way we treat children represents the way we treat other people who we devalue.
Conscious and intentional parenting commands the child to enforce boundaries to a certain degree, while corporal punishment subconsciously teaches children to allow the extreme crossing of their personal boundaries. When thinking about this point, a quote from my friend Turb comes to mind. "You could tell they loved me, but it was not the way I wanted to be loved." What if we allow children to show us the way that they wanted to be loved by respecting their boundaries, so they could have the opportunity to learn how to do so as well? And maybe even mirror it in relationships later on.
I don't think that my toddler is without an idea of what living fully and well means for him. Now, I may have to shape it and socialize him to think about other pieces of the world that he has not yet been exposed to and he doesn't understand, but he knows what brings him joy. He asks me for the things that he wants because we've established that you have already come into this world with wisdom and insight about what does it for you. So if he wants me to go play in the playroom with him and I don't feel like it, he's asking me for what he needs to live fully and well. And that's what operating. And so me going to play, even if I don't feel like it for a few minutes, or telling him, hey, give me 5 minutes until I get a little bit more energy and then I'll come play with you. That's me negotiating. I want to contribute to what living fully and well looks like for you at 3.5 years old. And I want you to be mindful that you have to respect my boundary of what living fully and well for me looks like as an adult. What's the most loving approach I can take to this moment? Because I want to raise a person who knows that he is loved and lovable.
I'd also like to raise this point. Conscious parenting techniques should not only be used with children. For example, When my friends and I are hanging out and it's getting to the time to leave, it can be difficult to part. One gentle parenting technique, in order to leave a stimulating environment like the playground that I saw on Instagram, was to give time reminders and then utilize a transitional activity leading up to your departure. So, going back to my example, let's just say instead of just upping and leaving while feeling so-so about it, I say, I'm leaving in 30 minutes. Then, at the 10-minute mark, I stand up and start walking and talking. Maybe even asking if they want to walk me to my car. These actions all ease my emotional and mental turmoil about the necessary decision of leaving my friends that I love interacting with so much in order to focus on other things that need my attention, like schoolwork or creating YouTube videos that resonate with myself and the community that we're building here.
What I'm trying to say is connect with your child emotionally. Because we as Afrocentric people, we like, the word parents, we think that, I know it's kind of dying out, but do it because I said so. Kids should be seen and not heard and stuff like that. I usually tell parents that we were raised like that. I was raised like that, but that was like authoritative kind of mindset. So authoritative mindset now, and we're living more into a democratic, liberal world. So our kids are into that world. We are raising kids in that world. Our kids are not in our world. So now we have to transfer into their world. And yes, we can. We just have to make that shift. And the first thing I will say is just make that connection with them, connect with them emotionally, because they have core needs as well, different from our core needs. So can you imagine? Even a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, if you can connect with a child and understand their core needs are core needs. It's not want. That's what they need to survive. That's what they need to thrive. That's what they need to flourish. That's what they need to carry on their day so they can feel good inside. So that's what I would say to parents. Connect with your child first before you can correct them.
The frame I use is compassion for the people who are closest to you, including parents, because they are not absent of this structural historical context. So if you have parents that grew up in a colonial state, in a colonial enterprise, and they were impoverished, and they were Black, and they were women, and all of these intersecting marginalized identities showed up in their lives, and they did the best they could, even if it wasn't enough in what you needed. And I'm like, all right, I understand where that came from. I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to perpetuate it, but I get where that came from. And so I'm not going to dehumanize you as I grew up in the same way. So I would say the same thing for my mom, having a different appreciation for how hard it probably was to raise 4 children by herself. I'm like, okay, so I see how popping off could happen in that context. That's not the acceptable outcome for me. That's not what I'm going to perpetuate, but I get how you got there because you were subjected to all of these same systems of oppression, and without the resources that I have been able to obtain because of the good stuff you did on top of the stuff that you could have done differently. All of the love investments in me, that mattered as much. And so I'm like, all right, here are the things I get to keep that you did really well and that meant something to me and that actually did allow me to flourish. And here are the things that I'm going to change. And my mother gets to bear witness to the way I parent. And so she's a different grandmother than she is a mother, because she sees what that looks like. And she's like, oh, okay, so this is how you talk to, she's not popping off and hit my child. That's not even a thing. That's not even something she would consider, because that's not a template in my relationship with Langston. Hey, and here he comes. Hi. Sure, come say hi.
Hi, baby.
Here, you can use my phone, but you have to have daddy turn it on, okay?
Okay.
Let's see what we can get to.
Okay, that is so precious. Okay.
And see, he knocked on the door. He was like, may I use your phone, please? Yes, thank you.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm.
And
sometimes it's a no, and sometimes it's a yes. It just depends on the moment. And if it's a no, and he's like, you're not contributing to me living fully and well. I'm like, well, Having too much phone time is going to mean this. So now we got to have that conversation. Can you close the door?
Sure.
Thank you. You taking your temperature? Okay. Are you healthy? Okay, good.
There is no one correct way to parent a child. However, respecting your position as a shepherd and caretaker and not trying to be a tyrant of a parent should be integral to all parenting styles. Some good questions that I don't hear many parents contend with in depth are who they're raising their child to be and what their goals as parents are. Whatever answers to these questions that parents might have, I don't believe that treating your child like a possession instead of an agentful being would be advantageous. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll focus more on the lived experiences of people from different communities in order to make it more personal and real.
What do you want to eat? Would you like a chicken sandwich?
From 81st Deli?
You want ice cream? You want the ice cream? The ice cream is what this whole conversation was about. You didn't know, but he was 10 steps ahead. He was like, I'm gonna come in here and look cute. I'm gonna be quiet while you do your interview, because guess what I would like? Ice cream. And he's gonna get some after this interview.